Hey everyone, I'm Ashley Banfield and this is Drop Dead Serious. Welcome to my temporary summer studio up in Canada. I'm in a cabin, so it's just a little hinky, but all the same content. It is day 19, if you can believe it, of Sean Diddy Combs' federal trial. And today, Diddy's ex-girlfriend, the woman who's been testifying under the pseudonym Jane, she took the stand for a third day, and what she said today was very different than the last few days. In fact, it was explosive. What she said sounded a lot more like the violence that we heard Cassie Ventura describe. And what she said puts Sean Combs a heck of a lot closer to the kind of illegal behavior that's required to prove racketeering in this trial. If you have ever wanted to be a fly on the wall in Diddy's world, when some of the biggest news over the past year and a half became public, well, today's your lucky day. The jury heard graphic personal text messages and audio recordings, and they also heard how Diddy found out that CNN was airing that violent video of him beating his girlfriend Cassie Ventura in a hotel hallway. That video that he allegedly thought that he'd taken care of. The jury also heard about the aftermath of Cassie Ventura's lawsuit and what that was like for Diddy. But before we get into today's testimony, we may have an answer to the question that everybody seems to be asking. If this is a racketeering trial, just like the trials that brought down the mob, where are all the co-conspirators, right? Yes, some alleged co-conspirators have been named by witnesses like Diddy's security guards and his assistants, and of course, his right-hand woman, Christina KK Coram, his chief of staff. Well, today we found out that she just might be testifying. And here's my guess. I am figuring that the feds have offered her either an immunity deal where they've said, get up on the stand, don't plead the fifth, and we won't come after you and charge you with all of these same racketeering crimes, like federal crimes that could put you away for 20 plus years. Or maybe they've said to her, we plan on charging you. And if you're charged, there will be no deal, right? So I don't know. There could be all sorts of negotiations going on behind the scenes, but she's going to have to answer to something at some point. Either she's going to have to get up on the stand and plead the fifth and then take her chances with the feds, right? I don't like her chances. Not after all the testimony and the text messages and everything you're about to hear. Or they gave her immunity, which would also get people a little riled up, because if she's guilty of some of the things that these witnesses are saying she's guilty of, she would walk. And just think about Jeffrey Epstein's right-hand woman, Ghislaine Maxwell. Things did not go well for Ghislaine Maxwell. She's locked up, right, for many, many years. But Jeffrey Epstein died. And so she was kind of the only person left holding the bag. It's possible they would have given her immunity, and then she might have gotten up on the stand and sung like a canary, or maybe she wouldn't have. Maybe she would have done exactly what she did do, and maybe she'd be in the same boat. Don't know. But we do have a lot to cover, so let's get right into it. Jane picked up her testimony right where she left off on Friday, diving right back into what happened after that infamous hotel night. And remember, hotel night is just another name for a freak-off, where male escorts are allegedly paid to have sex with Diddy's girlfriends while he watches and while he videotapes and while he masturbates. And so far, 2 of these girlfriends have testified they did not like them, they did not want them, and they did it just to please him and did it to avoid the wrath of Diddy. In Cassie's case, the wrath of Diddy meant beatings. In Jane's case, so far, up until today, the wrath of Diddy had meant he's going to financially torture me, take away my apartment, take away my livelihood, take away everything if I don't keep going with these awful freak-offs, even though I've been telling him I don't want them. Today that changed. Jane testified a few days after the New York hotel night that she saw Diddy again, and this time it was in Miami. And over dinner, he brought up the footage from the New York freak-off and said he wanted to watch it. She said that he then flew the same escort, the one from Atlanta, the guy named Cabral, back to Miami. So think about it. At first, that escort is allegedly flown from Miami to New York. And now Diddy is saying to Jane, according to her testimony, he's going to fly that same escort either from New York, if he stayed, or from Atlanta to Miami. It's important, right? It's important about the travel for illegal sex. And the whole idea was so that he would join them again. Jane called it part 2, like, hotel night continued. Then Jane testified that the next time she saw Diddy was in Los Angeles. But by this time, she said it wasn't romantic. It had turned into a fight, like an epic fight. Remember when I said that we might be getting closer to proving racketeering with Jane's testimony today? This is the part I was talking about, plus a few others you'll hear about in a moment. But Jane said that Diddy had texted about setting up another quote-unquote party with escorts. But Jane said she didn't want to do it this time because she had just seen photos, she said, of Diddy online with an ex-girlfriend, and she was furious about it. She told the jury that she'd never met any of his exes, but seeing those photos, she said, hit her hard. Then prosecutors showed text messages from October 15th, 2023. And in the messages, Jane was venting to Diddy about feeling dismissed. Diddy responded to the texts with, quote, "Girl, stop. You know I don't feed into this. I need you," end quote. And a text from Diddy saying, "I really need you. I'm asking you not to do this," end quote. Jane responded with, quote, "I'm not an animal. I'm not a porn star," end quote. So you're seeing that she's resisting, right? This is digital evidence that Jane is saying, I don't want this. I don't want this. I'm not a porn star. I'm not an animal. It's important. She told the jury that those hotel nights had desensitized her, that they felt like, quote, loveless, cold sex, end quote. Diddy tried to brush it off, according to Jane, the text message saying, quote, "Your detective skills got your mind going crazy," he said, referring to the things that Jane had seen online. And Jane replied, quote, "It's been 3 years of me having to fuck strangers," she wrote. "I'm tired." Diddy replied, "So we're breaking up?" At this point in her testimony, Jane was gasping and crying while reading these text messages out loud. And then came a text message from October 16th, 2023. Diddy wrote, quote, "Let's spend the day, just me and you. No strangers, please." But Jane said she didn't believe him. She told the jury that this was classic love bombing, a manipulative cycle, she said, where Diddy would pour on the affection just to get what he wanted. Jane then texted the following, quote, "I'm not trying to fuck strangers to fulfill your fetishes. You want to have me suck some dick so you can just jet off to an island with Gina," end quote. Again, important. She's showing that she's mad, she's angry, she doesn't want to do these freak-offs. Diddy brushed it off, said Jane was, quote, tripping. But Jane said she wasn't. She told him point blank that she was drained, that she needed a break. She texted, quote, "Please just leave me alone," end quote. Diddy replied, quote, "Gotcha." But an hour later, Diddy texted again, "I need you for real," end quote. Jane told the jury she believed these flip-flops were tied to Diddy's drug use, that when he was coming down from partying, the texts would get more intense. But then came the voice note. Jane said Diddy sent her an audio message saying things like, "I need you, girl." And by that point, she wasn't answering his calls because, in her words, quote, "I'd be right back into whatever he wanted," end quote. But on October 20th, 2023, Jane texted Diddy, quote, "Good morning," and asked for money. She told the jury that her house was still mostly unfurnished and that she'd gone into debt trying to make it livable. But when Diddy didn't answer her, Jane followed up the next day, quote, "Can you communicate back?" Jane told the jury she felt abandoned, like she was left high and dry. She said Diddy was never too busy for a hotel night, but suddenly he couldn't answer her texts. Eventually, Diddy did respond with a voice note. Jane said the message didn't mention money. Instead, Diddy told her, quote, "Leave me the fuck alone. I need to chill. I'm single," end quote. In another text, Jane asked Diddy for money again, this time with more desperation. Quote, "I already did not want to do anything, and I did," she wrote. "You had me feeling a little crazy," end quote. On October 24th, they exchanged more texts, starting out normal, like good morning messages, like everything was fine. But it wasn't. Jane told him she still felt upset that she'd been, quote, violated and manipulated. She called it a, quote, toxic ass relationship, end quote, and asked for the money again. Diddy's response, "You threatened me," end quote. Jane testified that Diddy was referring to a phone call somewhere in the middle of this whole exchange where Jane expressed what she described as frustration, pain, and agony. But instead of acknowledging it, Jane said Diddy turned it around, threatening to stop paying her rent. That, she said, made her livid. Jane fired back, "I'm not Gina. I'm not Cassie," end quote. She told the jury those women left Diddy quietly, that she would not. In one message, she warned him, quote, "Don't play with me." She told him to take his meds. She told him to, quote, "Watch what you say to me. Honor the 2 years," end quote, a reference to their so-called love contract. Diddy responded with, quote, "Let's just leave each other alone. You're fucking crazy for real. Everyone fucking warned me," end quote. And then, quote, "We both don't have to do anything we don't want to do," end quote. Jane said she understood that as a warning about her rent. In one of her final messages, Jane texted, "Stick to your word, and that's it. I heard that evil coming out of you," referring to the shift in Diddy's tone. She told him she had, quote, "real-life triggering PTSD from hotel nights." He countered by saying Jane wanted the hotel nights, that the proof was in her actions, that she arranged them, sometimes even picked the escorts herself. Well, this is important, right? Because this is where you know the defense attorneys are going to come back at Jane under cross-examination and say, "Did you set these all up? Did you text this guy? Did you invite him over? Look at all these fawning messages of you to Diddy or to the escorts, etc., etc." The same stuff that we saw Cassie Ventura undergo under, cross-examination. But Jane told the jury that she did set up some of those hotel nights herself, but she explained it. She said it wasn't because she wanted to. She said it was survival, and that she arranged the nights with escorts that she knew so that she wouldn't have to have sex with any more strangers. She called it, quote, her way of trying to find some control, end quote. She texted Diddy back saying, quote, "I regret everything. Dark, toxic shit," end quote. Diddy told Jane she was burning a bridge and that if she walked away, she might not get another chance. And the next time they met face-to-face was February of 2024. But even during that time apart, from November to February, they still communicated through texts and through phone calls. It was like a digital relationship that didn't end. On December 7th, 2023, Jane sent Diddy a screenshot of something that she'd seen on social media. The court was not told exactly what it was that she saw, but Jane did tell the jury that it was, quote, very triggering to her. In one text, Jane asked Diddy to stop drugging women. She said something like, quote, "Let that stop with me," and pleaded with him to stop emotionally harming people. Diddy accused her of, quote, "trying to set me up." But then the texts took a real emotional turn. Screenshots shown in court revealed Diddy asking Jane if she was dating. Jane told him to put himself in her shoes. She said she, quote, "felt like a side chick and a sex worker in her own relationship." She called the relationship, quote, "an unproductive couple of years." Think about this. She is literally using the term sex worker. "I feel like a sex worker." This is a sex trafficking trial. And she's got text messages extemporaneous, right? That say, "I feel like a sex worker." That is really, really powerful. And I think, maybe I'll be wrong, but I think that during summation, I think you're going to hear the prosecutors bring up that text. "I feel like a sex worker in my own relationship." And then Diddy asked where his Christmas gift was. Boy, this guy, right? Look, he's not on trial for being an asshole, but what an asshole. What a complete fucking asshole. And why these women can't see that, that's a whole other story. Their psychologists are dealing with them. They're trying to put it together as well. I've never walked in their shoes. I can just tell you I would never walk in those shoes. I would never let anyone treat me anywhere near what this man did to those women. It'll be up to the jury to decide if it's illegal, but what a fucking asshole, right? I think we can all agree on that. That's your legacy, Diddy. Well, that's the least of it. Your legacy might be much worse, but my God, your legacy is that you are such a shithead. Anyway, about the Christmas gift that Diddy wanted to know about, Jane said that she could barely afford gifts for her own child. Jane told Diddy, quote, "I'm not the same person anymore. Jane testified that she never had anyone else to talk to, not about this. Something she called a shameful, dark secret, one that she shared only with Diddy. Someone she still called, quote, my partner, my love, end quote. But then she stopped answering his calls, she said. Quote, I didn't want him to get in my head, end quote, because, quote, the gaslighting was working. A FaceTime call, however, changed everything, she said. According to Jane, Diddy called her to say, quote, charge me, meaning she could ask him for whatever money she needed so that they could move on. And so she did. She told the jury that in a follow-up text, Jane asked Diddy for 15 months' rent and $100,000 for each of the 3 years that they were together. She explained that she'd given up her job to be at his beck and call. But his response, quote, fuck you. Don't ever text me again, end quote. She said Diddy called her an opportunist and that he threatened to call the police. Jane said she told him it was the other way around. She wrote back, quote, you're the opportunist. You broke me. You were a full-time job. You consumed my life, end quote. The courtroom heard that Diddy fired back, calling her a con artist. Jane replied with, quote, you keep describing yourself. And then the darkest moment yet. Jane texted, I'm going to kill myself. You all use me and break me. She said she wanted everything to, quote, go black. At this point, in court, Jane was sobbing. Later on December 28th, 2023, Diddy reached out again. He texted, don't hurt yourself, I love you, end quote. Jane responded, nobody loves me. And Diddy came back with, I will, and can you do the same for me? Jane told him, you jab at all of my wounds. And then she added, you're psychotic. Jane told the jury that Diddy kept calling her, kept pressuring her. And then, at what she described as the, quote, height of his anger, Diddy made a threat that shook her to the core. He told her, according to Jane, that he would show the father of her child the videotapes. You know the ones from the hotel nights where she's having sex with the escorts. Side note here, if this is true, this comes real close to extortion, right? If it doesn't hit it right on the money. And I think we all know, if you've been watching or listening to these podcasts, one of the predicate acts of racketeering is extortion. Here's how Jane said it happened. She said Diddy invited her to Miami, asking her to come and comfort him after Cassie Ventura filed a lawsuit against him. Let's just, ruminate on that one for a minute. The ex-girlfriend that I beat the shit out of on video in a hotel hallway has sued me for all the same things that you hate about me, that you've texted me you really hate doing. So come and help me out here. Come and, comfort me. Can I go back to calling him a complete asshole? Oh my God. The gall. My ex-girlfriend, the one I beat to shit. Yeah, she just sued me. So can you come over here and give me some love? Jane said she politely declined. But when she told him no, she said Diddy threatened to show the hotel night tapes to the father of her child. And Jane said she flew into a panic. She said she told the jury that she reached out to somebody she thought might be able to help. Diddy's longtime chief of staff, Christina KK Coram. Text messages between Jane and KK were shown in court. So, what that means, corroborating evidence. Jane wrote that she normally wouldn't involve KK in personal matters, but said Diddy was threatening her. She told KK the tapes were filmed while she was, quote, heavily drugged. And she said that Diddy was being hurtful. She pleaded with KK to, quote, talk some sense into him, end quote. She testified that KK called her and urged her to stay calm. Jane said that she then asked for help hiding the phones that contained the explicit videos. According to Jane, KK did not give any kind of direct answer to that desperate plea. Jane did say that KK told her something that really, really stuck, that Jane and Diddy needed to, quote, give each other space, or else they'd end up in a, quote, situation like we're in now. And Jane told the jury she took that to mean Cassie's lawsuit. The KK was warning her, without saying it outright, that if this kept escalating, it could lead to another lawsuit. And after that final exchange with KK, Jane said she went quiet. Remember when I said that KK might very well have to answer to this stuff in court? Well, this This is the stuff I mean. Allegations that KK, Christina Coram, is brokering extortion and obstruction of justice. Okay, because let's go back here. Extortion, you stop asking me to honor the love contract between us, or I'm going to show sex videos of you to your baby daddy. And then, by the way, Christina Coram gets on the line and starts saying, you need to calm down. Things are getting out of control. So, that could easily be seen as obstruction of justice. That could easily be seen as extortion. And guess what? Those are two predicate acts for, you guessed it, hey, ding, 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 racketeering. And Christina Coram would need immunity to explain all of these texts and all of these phone calls, or she could face the same serious racketeering charges that could lock her up for years, just like Diddy. In January 2024, Jane took a trip to Las Vegas with an old friend, a man she said that was just a platonic relationship. She emphasized that to the jury. But she also said that in the group was a rapper that the friend knew and the rapper's girlfriend. She said they went to a play, they celebrated a birthday, they hit a strip club, and that at the party, Jane spotted somebody unexpected. She said a man named Antoine, who's an escort from one of the hotel nights that she said she'd been involved in. This was the first time she said she'd ever seen Antoine, the escort, without Diddy present, and Jane told the jury that she, quote, reacted just fine. She said they hugged, said hello, nothing more. But that later that night, Jane and her friend went back to the rapper's hotel room for about 20 minutes, and once inside, Jane saw something that made her freeze, she said. Antoine the escort was there, she said, having sex with a woman that Jane didn't recognize and that everyone else in the room was watching. Vegas. This might seem like a coincidence that she just ran into Antoine, but it is vitally important, and you're going to see why in just a moment. Then the prosecutor switched subjects and focused on whether she consented to those hotel nights. The prosecutor asked her directly, quote, were you consenting? Jane replied, quote, I'm still trying to figure that out. I just want to add here that is something that Diddy's lawyers for sure are going to seize upon when it comes time for cross-examination, right? I think cross-exam is going to be so blistering. And if she can't even answer her friendly fire, which is the prosecutor's question, were you consenting to these hotel nights? If she can't even say, I really didn't want to do them, but I felt like I was pressured to do them for some kind of reason, it's not going to fly well that she's still trying to process that. It's not going to fly well, and it's going to be harder to answer that question to Diddy's lawyers, but that's still ahead, so we'll see what happens there. And then Jane's testimony pivoted to Cassie's lawsuit. The prosecutor asked Jane how she reacted when she found out about the lawsuit. And Jane said she, quote, almost fainted. In fact, I think I did faint, end quote. Jane said she read every single word of Cassie's 35-page complaint and that 3 very specific pages mirrored her own experience almost word for word. She told the jury, I couldn't sleep. It felt like a nightmare. I felt so bad, end quote. And then prosecutors introduced a new piece of evidence, a transcript and an audio recording from a phone call made on November 19th, 2023, and that is right after Cassie's lawsuit was filed. The jury heard Diddy's voice saying, quote, I'm really sorry you're feeling this way. He said, my love is real. I thought it was some kinky shit we both enjoyed, end quote. He went on, quote, I don't want you to feel this way. I just want to move on and stop all the madness. I really can't be on the phone right now, end quote. Jane told the jury that she had no idea that call was being recorded. Diddy suggested that she call KK, Christina Coram, if she needed anything. Then he added, quote, please pray for me. I'll be praying for you too, end quote. Again, Jane told the jury she did not know that this call was being recorded. And when Diddy said, you ain't got to worry about nothing else, Jane said that Diddy was talking about the rent, covering her rent. One more thing to hold over her head. By February 2024, after weeks of no contact and moments of emotional clarity, Jane said that she heard from Diddy again. He sent her a text on February 6th that read, quote, sending you love, had a dream about you. I miss my pretty smile. I forgot what it looks like. Jane told the jury she was emotionally open to hearing from him because as much as she'd been hurt, she still missed him. She replied, quote, put a smile on it then. Diddy followed up, asking her about her birthday plans. He wanted a picture of her smile. He suggested spending the day together. Jane made it clear to the jury that idea did not come from her, it came from Diddy, and she hesitated. She told the court she had trauma around birthdays, specifically birthdays spent with Diddy. She reminded him in a text that her birthdays always felt minimized, overlooked, especially compared to the elaborate celebrations he threw for other women. But despite how she felt, Jane told the jury that after saying yes, her birthday plans with Diddy were set in motion. And when she arrived, she said it felt different, romantic, and beautiful. Jane told the court it felt like a, quote, proper birthday, end quote. And then the night shifted. They got high on ecstasy, and that's when, according to Jane, Diddy turned to her and asked, quote, "Do you want to see Dawn?" Dawn was a former entertainer, she said, someone Jane had had sex with before during hotel nights. She said she agreed, but not because she wanted to, instead because, in her words, she felt familiar with it, defeated by it. Dawn was apparently already there, and Jane said she had sex with him while Diddy watched and did his thing on her birthday. And Jane told the jury that the cycle resumed. Soon after the birthday, Diddy found texts from a man named Bear, who'd been sending her money. Jane said Diddy exploded when he found them and later texted, quote, "You're making your own money. Hopefully we can have a clean break," end quote. Jane took that to mean he wouldn't pay for her rent anymore. Jane said she told Diddy that all she needed was 3 months to be exact to cover her $10,000 rent bill and stabilize her life. Not long after, Jane got a message from Diddy's accountant. The message said her lease was up in April, and Jane said she took it as a sign the clock was ticking. If Diddy was using his accountant, a guy on his payroll, a guy in the enterprise, to threaten her or coerce her or financially force her to do something against her will, once again, those are the kinds of things that fall into the racketeering statute, and that could easily be brought up as one of the predicate acts, right? One of the predicate acts within the enterprise falling in a pattern of behavior. These are all the things that you have to prove in racketeering. But even with all the tension, all the back and forth, Jane confirmed that yes, Diddy did continue paying her rent. And then something dramatic happened. As we all know, Diddy's properties were raided by the feds in March of 2024. Jane told the jury that on that very same day, the feds came knocking on her door too. Jane said her first instinct was to call Diddy, but that he didn't answer. So she said she reached out to someone else on his team, and they told her to contact his lawyer, which she said she did. And then she got her own lawyer, paid for by Diddy. Later, she got a new lawyer, paid for by Diddy. And today she confirmed under oath her current attorney is still being paid by Diddy. And then more drama. Jane testified that the escort named Cabral, the one who'd been part of the hotel nights, she said he threatened to release a 35-minute video of her having sex with him during one of those freak-offs unless she paid him $10,000. She says he claimed the footage was recorded accidentally when Diddy picked up Cabral's phone during one of their hotel night sessions instead of his own phone. Jane told the jury that she called Diddy in tears and that Diddy promised to have his lawyers handle it. She said that afterwards, she contacted Cabral and told him she would not give in to this extortion. This is heartbreaking. Sometime later on, she testified that a major media company contacted her to say they had purchased the tape and wanted a comment. In the end, the tape was never released. To this day, she doesn't know why. I will be very interested to find out if a man named Cabral, stage name, whatever, ends up taking the stand. That could be one other person who's in a heap o' trouble, because that is 100% extortion, and that is a crime. And he could be in a lot of trouble, especially if there's a digital trail, text messages, the like. I can't wait. Maybe they wouldn't find him. Maybe they couldn't find him. I don't know. With a name like Cabral, who knows? And then the moment that rocked the internet. Jane told the jury that she was in Miami in bed with Diddy when one of his sons knocked on the door and said the following, quote, "Something happened," end quote. She looked at her phone, and guess what she saw? The infamous video of Diddy assaulting Cassie Ventura in a hotel hallway, the one that was released by CNN. And as we all know, it was a video that went viral. And Jane said his team huddled to craft an apology. She even gave feedback on the apology and told Diddy that his version was good, given the circumstances. Then Jane said she flew to Los Angeles. She testified that when she eventually saw his apology released on social media, it was not the same version that she had seen before she left, and said it did not seem as heartfelt after his lawyers had weighed in. And after that, Jane did not see Diddy again in person until June 18th, 2024. She said she remembered the date exactly because, as she put it, quote, "It was a very terrible day." It's important to remember, as you hear what Jane is about to describe, that all of these things allegedly happened after Diddy's homes have been raided by the feds, after Diddy becomes painfully aware that he's facing federal charges. He's under investigation. They have warrants. They've gone into both of his homes. They've collected all of this evidence, all of his electronics. Okay, with that as the preamble, imagine that Diddy, if he's guilty of these things, really did the following. Jane testified that she and Diddy were drinking and having fun at her home when she confronted Diddy about who he was with on a recent trip to Utah. The girl in question was in her mid-20s, but Jane thought that she was under 18, at least when he started dating her, and she called Diddy a pedophile. And then Jane said things started getting physical. She said she shoved his head into a counter and then began throwing candles and glasses at him, screaming, "I hate you." Jane said that this made Diddy mad, like really mad. She said that Diddy chased her through the apartment and even kicked in several sets of doors to get to her. Like, she got into one set of doors, he kicked it down. She went into the bathroom and he kicked that down, allegedly. And then from the bathroom, she went into the closet and he kicked that door down. She said she made a run for the front door, but that before she could escape, she said Diddy kicked her hard in the back of her thigh and then grabbed her by the neck in a chokehold. Jane said that she squirmed free and ran 6 blocks barefoot in the middle of the night. She testified that she hid behind a wall for what felt like 2 hours. No shoes, no phone, no plan. Just trying to survive, she said. Eventually, she said, she took a roundabout route back home, hoping that Diddy would be gone, but that when she got back home, he wasn't. He was still there. She told the court that she was terrified and that she made a break for it into the guest room and locked the door. But she said that Diddy kicked in that door. She then said she ran for the back patio and said, quote, "I punched him, and then he punched me." Jane said that she punched Diddy in the temple hard. She said she was screaming, "I hate you," the entire time. She said that Diddy responded by punching her twice, once in the forehead and once near her eye. Jane said that she ran into the backyard, fell to the ground, and curled into a ball. She said she covered her face and her head, but that the blows kept coming. She said Diddy punched her several more times, that he kicked her too several times, all while yelling at her that she was, quote, "trying to take him away from his kids and his family," end quote. Jane said she told him that wasn't true. And then Jane testified he grabbed her by the hair and her arms and dragged her back into the house as she screamed, "Leave me the fuck alone, just leave." But she said he dragged her back to the master bedroom. At some point during this incident, Jane said she got a hold of Diddy's phone and used it to call the woman, the other woman that they'd been arguing about earlier. Jane said she asked if that woman had been on the family trip to Utah, and the woman said, quote, "really insulting things back." And then she said Diddy physically held her down and forced her to the ground. Desperate to break free, Jane shouted, "He's beating my ass right now." The phone call ended. Jane testified that Diddy hung up on the woman on the other end of the line and then FaceTimed his assistant to confirm he wasn't with another woman on the Utah family trip. Presumably, there would be a digital record of these phone calls, a FaceTime, a call to the assistant, all on this date at this time. These could be very helpful and corroborative if they exist. Later, when she went to cool off in the shower, she said she noticed that she had 2 large lumps on her head and a black eye. She said that Diddy followed her into the shower and slapped her 3 times, causing her to fall each time. After she got out of the shower, Jane said Diddy told her to put ice on her injuries and get dressed, which she understood to mean lingerie. She said that she complied and that soon after, Diddy picked up her phone to cast porn onto the TV and text Antoine, one of the escorts that they'd been with together, the one that she'd seen in Vegas. She said the messages were casual at first, like, hey, quote, what are you doing? But suddenly Jane said that Diddy noticed that Jane had had messages with Antoine in Vegas and that Diddy got very, very angry. Next thing I know, Jane said, quote, he told me to open the gate for Antoine. Jane told the jury everything about the rest of the night was awkward and uncomfortable. Jane said that Diddy told her to do her hair and put on makeup to cover her bruises. Jane said she followed Diddy's orders and that Diddy told her, quote, you're not going to ruin my night, end quote. Jane testified that Diddy forced her to take an ecstasy pill and then perform oral sex on Antoine while Diddy watched. Jane said that afterwards it was her job to pay Antoine before getting reimbursed by Diddy's team. And again, if this stuff is true, and Diddy is using his employees to pay for that escort and using his company money to pay for that escort, it sounds a lot like he's using his enterprise to break the law, aka racketeering. As her testimony was wrapping up, Jane told the jury that she's cooperating with the prosecutors and that she is still attending therapy paid for by Diddy. She said she stopped cooperating with Diddy's defense once she realized that she was being loyal to him instead of being loyal to the truth. When asked about Diddy today, Jane said, quote, I pray for his continued healing and I pray for peace for him, end quote. Wow. It took a while for me to see why the prosecutors put Jane on the stand. I mean, at first I thought, this is day after day of testimony from a woman who says she continued to do these awful freak-offs even though she didn't want to do them because she didn't want to lose her apartment, because she didn't want Diddy to stop paying her bills. And for me, that's not necessarily coercion. I think it's hard for a jury to feel like that's the kind of coercion that would amount to racketeering, right? I think a lot of jurors might just see that as, look, you had every right to get up and go. You don't have the right to have a $10,000 a month apartment. And if you don't like the sex that he wants you to go through with, then get out of that apartment. So I couldn't really understand why the prosecutors risked such an incredible set of testimony from Cassie, followed up by what felt like weaker testimony from Jane. Awful, don't get me wrong, awful, awful, awful stuff. And I said it before, Diddy is a dick. I mean, he is disgusting. He is foul. He is an asshole. He is the worst person in the world, just in terms of being, a vile human being and a terrible boyfriend. But the way he treated her, did it amount to crime, coercion, coercive sex, extortion, bribery, any of that? And I didn't see it. And then came the violence. Then came the testimony about violence. And then came the testimony about extortion. I'm going to show your baby daddy the videotapes of you with one of the escorts. So I think what I'm seeing now is a very long mountain that was built with a big cherry on the top of it. And that was this very violent testimony. Not only that, but a lot of texts that corroborate, right? A lot of phone calls that corroborate her version of events. And also, just to add to that, staff members heavily involved in taking part in some of these illegal activities, like the payments and the bribery and the coercion and the phone calls and all the rest. So I can see now why Jane's testimony is important, to create the enterprise where he's using his staff and he's getting his staff to pay for the illegal sex and the prostitutes that cross state lines, etc. Now I can see where Jane can help to get the prosecutors once again to, racketeering. I saw it with Cassie and I'm now seeing it more with Jane. And by the way, before I even go on about that, I should tell you, we're just in the prosecution's case with her, right? Tomorrow, Jane's going to take the stand again, and it is time for cross-exam, and that's going to be just brutal. If the past is any guide, she is in for the worst day of her life, maybe 2 or 3 days of her life, because the cross-exam is going to be so blistering on this woman. Yes, she's been through hell. Yes, she's been treated just abysmally by a man. And there she is, because he's charged with racketeering. She's going to have to take the brunt of his lawyers cross-examining her, to keep him out of prison. So there you go. Can't wait for tomorrow. At least, can't wait to see what the strategy is, right? Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. I'm Ashley Banfield, and remember, the truth isn't just serious, it's drop dead serious.